this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. So let's get right into it. First, we have why journos will never stop lying about Gamergate from Mentis Wave on YouTube, and I posted that, and I said, good video on how the alphabet media, EX, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NYT, etc., aren't even bothering to do research or interact with the outgroup anymore in regards to Gamergate, instead preferring to cite their old data so that they can circle jerk their old narratives about how bad it is. That's pretty much all they are, the circle jerk, and people have really caught on to it. We can only hope their demise will happen as swiftly as possible. And next we have, let's talk about the Senate border deal, and that's a video from Bo of the Fifth Column from Post-Binary Confederation, and they said, relevant to the discussion is why the House Republicans are avoiding the deal they claim to have been fighting for. Senate Republicans approve and Biden is willing to sign. That's the obvious fact that they're holding it hostage, because without border fear-mongering, which according to Fox is World War Z scenario out there, they have little else to run on. Another is they're not ready to go against their donors' agenda. Overall, all this taking a stance and rebelling against the feds is just talk. It's all just grandstanding because all they have is fear, and as the founder says, that is a tool of tyrants. And I guess I would agree with that. I think the border deal is mostly just throwing money at Ukraine and Israel, and that's why it's bad, but ultimately, I do agree that they like to use fear mongering, and I personally don't really care for that. I don't really care for them throwing money at the foreign countries either, so there's that as well. Then we have executive power and the border, and that's a self-post from Mild Gorilla, and they said, so the argument I see from the Republicans going around is that they shouldn't pass border legislation, these Biden should just take executive action on it. What happened to reigning an executive authority? And I agree, increasingly people don't care about reigning in any authority. They don't care about checks and balances. They just want everyone in positions of power to justify whatever they want to, and no one will be held accountable. And that's the sad truth about the state of politics today. Probably always, but it's at least they tried to hide it in the past, I would say. Then we have Arizona GOP lawmakers back bill to prohibit satanic displays on public property from KNOW.org by Tom Fertan, and they added this bill should die quickly. And I personally think, I think it's probably not going to last too long, because then you'd have to ban all religious displays on public property, and that's not something that I think is going to hold up too well. Then we have the era of war crime influencers, and that's a YouTube video posted by Chad Muffin from the Yugo Pink channel, and they added a modern Jim Crow 2.0 has been going on for years. It's been building up for years through offering on social media all of my American tax dollars. And I would agree with that. What the thing with social media is, it usually ends up being a circle jerk and an echo chamber and all that, and you definitely see that when it comes to how people can push what they will justify whatever their party says to, if the narrative goes along with it, So that's why, you're seeing increasingly people are more pro-war than they've ever been, because the party says be pro-war, and that's not something that I think is very libertarian. Then we have, when government meddles, uses state violence, those it wants to help are the ones that get hurt. And that's for a self-post from Red Eggplant 01, they said, government is not a solver of economic issues. Government is the creator of economic issues. Why is that? It is because government has only one tool when it addresses any supposed problem: violence. When one uses violence as a means that the opposite of what you intended is the eventual outcome, as we see with the folks in Seattle, the government wanted to help in the link below. And then they linked to a video from YouTube by the King 5 Seattle channel. It says Seattle ordinance intended to help app delivery workers is hurting them. And I would agree with what they said. Ultimately, all government power does come through government force, violence, as they said, and that's not something that I think is very libertarian. Libertarians are, do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone else. And when you have someone have a monopoly on violence, that group or person is automatically going to be hurting other people, because they can say whatever, they can do whatever they want and get away with it. And that's what we see when it comes to government. Then we have r/Libertarian Censored discusses and grades the U.S. Vice President's number 32, John Nance Garner. And I said the incumbent Speaker of the House at the time of his election as VP, surprisingly the most recent one to serve as POTUS for VP, and only one of three to do so. James K. was POTUS and Skylar Colfax as the VP were the other two. Garner was well known by the nickname Cactus Jackson. He supported the prickly pear cactus as the state flower of Texas during his time in the state House of Representatives. The Blue Bond ended up winning. Another interesting fact about him is that he met his wife when he defeated her in the Democratic primary for Uvalde County Judge in 1893. He famously described the vice presidency as not worth a bucket of warm piss. Eventually split with FDR and a number of issues such as balancing the budget, the centralization of too much power in the federal government, and his plan to pack the Supreme Court, and ran against him in the 1940 Democratic National Convention where he lost in a landslide. If Roosevelt respected the two-term tradition or was otherwise term limited, I think there is a very good chance that Garner wins the 1940 election. He was replaced by Henry Wallace on Roosevelt's next ticket. Afterwards, he retired from public life and died at the ripe old age of 98, the longest-lived VP so far. He was the longest-lived VP or POTUS, but Jimmy Carter just recently surpassed him on that front. Final grade C+. So that's my thoughts on him. The next we have Jobs versus Machines, the rise of artificial intelligence from John Stossel on YouTube, and I posted that. And I like the point that Stossel makes in this video. He says, ultimately, the machines aren't going to take our jobs. We'll find new jobs. Like that's what always has happened throughout history and improving technology. Everyone used to work as farmers pretty much, and now only like less than 1% of Americans do. So jobs will change with time changes, and we're seeing that in regards to the rise of AI and modern technology. Then we have, as conservative spolk, U.S. Border Patrol Union endorses Senate immigration deal from NBCNews.com, but from Kage blah blah blah. And, I think that is, if the union wants to endorse, I think they should be able to. But, ultimately, it does come down to that they have the force on their side. So, I don't think it really matters what Border Patrol bill they pass, since the Border Patrol can just justify enforcing whatever it wants regardless of what's written down. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have labeling someone as racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, etc. as a way to disregard the rest of their arguments. And I said I just went over this in the comment I made on the Gamergate video I posted here yesterday, but I thought I would make a top little thread for it as well, since it's a tactic that you see both the alpha media and a lot of people on social media do. If you can find a way to smear the outgroup and make them out to be the worst thing ever, then you imply that none of their ideas are worth engaging with, and as such that they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt in any situation whatsoever. It's the tactics that is used to shut down any debate so people can circle themselves to how correct and smart they are, all the while completely ignoring any criticism whatsoever. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue, So, I think, you can see that happen with people on the left as well, when, like, the Wall Street Journal labels Dearborn, Michigan as America's jihad capital for questioning Zionism. And increasingly, you can't dissent from the media at all without being demonized for it. And that's increasingly why I think people don't trust them anymore. Then we have Stanford study, no evidence of voter fraud in Pennsylvania other states during 2020 election, from CBSNews.com, by Kage blah blah blah. And I said, let's see what they say for this year's election if the Dems end up losing. The two major parties are both going to say fraud when the other one wins, so it's not like they are consistent at all. People will just believe whatever they want to in regards to fraud, and they should be able to do so. Because, the Dems were like, oh, Russia rigged it after 2016. And now they were like, oh, there can't be any voter fraud after the 2020 election. So that just goes to show you how the narrative can change on a dime when the election results do or don't go your way. Then we have Trump is not immune in the 2020 election interference case, appeals court rules from NBCNews.com by Baton 13. And I said, I personally hope they kick him off the ballot and rule him ineligible. I'm kind of tired of him and the endless circle jerk around him. Plus, I want to see how many states nullify and put him on the ballot anyway. It's probably not happening, but the Roberts Court has shown that it has a history of groundbreaking decisions like keeping Obamacare, legalizing same-sex marriage, and overturning Roe v. Wade, so never say never. And I also had a tweet from Tim Pool. We also might see them prosecute Obama, which would be fun, for killing Anwar al-Awlaki's son without due process, even though he was a U.S. citizen. So that's my thoughts on that issue. And then next we have When Houthis disrupt global trade, then it's directly impacting people's lives. But Israel is blockading a city of 2 million who do not have access to enough medicine, food, and fuel. And it's just business as usual. Every Arab should know that Americans value trade more than Arab lives. From International Silver One, that's a cross post from the Pan Arab subreddit. And that's a tweet from the Department of State. You may not realize that Houthi attacks against commercial shipping vessels in the Red Sea are directly impacting people's lives. Ships taking longer journeys increase the cost of food, medicine, and fuel, as well as life-saving aid to people who need it most. And I personally would agree with that. The thing is that, the government, the U.S. government, will just by using whatever force it wants to, and they'll ultimately find that it doesn't matter what the reason is. Since they have the monopoly on force, they can just do whatever they want, and ultimately no one will hold them accountable for it. That's the sad truth. Then we have this NPR report is one of the most revealing I've seen in quite some time. It's naked mainstream hostility to any online space that is dedicated to men trying to be healthy and normal. You see the same demonization of gym bros, nutrition guys, testosterone discussion, etc. from Seger and Jetty on Twitter, and I posted that, and that was him quote tweeting an NPR article. He said, the video is part of a thriving online landscape dedicated to helping men suppress the urge to masturbate. More than 2 decades of growing internet use has surfaced fears about the social and psychological impacts of nearly unfettered access to pornography, but many researchers and sex therapists worry that the online communities that have formed in response to these fears often endorse inaccurate medical information, exacerbate mental health problems, and in some cases overlap with extremist and hate groups. And I said, I'm not really a prude when it comes to porn, but the fact that the media is demonizing anyone critical of it is a good marker for where we are now as a society. And I also linked to a tweet from Warren McIntyre that said, I said more NPR shenanigans, and that he tweeted National Public Radio Rwanda, and he quote tweeted Fisher King, who said, flipped on NPR and heard white people shouldn't be involved in the conversation and flipped it off 2 seconds or so. That's just NPR's kind of progressive propaganda, and increasingly, hopefully we can get them shut down soon. At the very least, take out all their federal funding and stuff, yeah. So then we have, and I also added, it's completely fine to think masturbation is healthy and normal. I 100% agree with the statement. But the demonization of anyone who thinks otherwise is an example of the thread I posted earlier today. The media demonizes anyone who senses it all, and once you've seen it, it becomes really hard to unsee. Then we have Jim Jordan. Amazon files show White House pressured tech giant to censor books contradicting admin's positions from not to be, and I posted that, and I said, big business and big government are often intertwined. I think Jim Jordan, he might have a bit of an agenda, but, he did have the Facebook files, and I think those ended up being legit, so I think this is probably as well. The government can ultimately bully whatever company it wants to do whatever it wants, and since they have force on their side, that's not something I think is libertarian, Then we have bill introduced to ban ranked choice voting in Ohio from WTOL.com, and that's from Kage blah blah, and they added fuck Republicans and Democrats are going together to try and ban ranked choice voting. And yeah, I personally don't think that's very good. I think I think that would be better. The ranked choice voting is probably better than we have currently. But with that being said, I don't think it really matters too much because of how much political capital the two major parties have. Then we have what happens when social trust collapses from Common Sense Soapbox on YouTube, and I commented, looks like we're going to find out. So hopefully social trust doesn't collapse anytime soon, but it seems like with social media and people increasingly being distrustful of each other in the wake of a tense economic and political climate. So that's my thoughts there. Then we have Lankford says border security bill would have stopped 100,000 entries in past 4 months from TulsaWar.com by Kage blah blah blah. And I said, and as we know, politicians have never been known to lie before. Then we have dozens more alleged sexual abuse at youth facility owned by Arkansas businessman freed by Trump from ArkTimes.com by Kage blah blah blah. And yeah, I personally don't think that's very good. But ultimately, I think this is just another Orange Man Bad post. Attack Trump for what he's doing, not what someone you see Freed is doing. So that's my thought on that issue. Then we have They Function for Centuries, dude, by Donald Key, and that's crossed from the Facepalm subreddit, and it's a Donald Trump Truth from Truth Social, he says, if immunity is not granted to a president, every presidential leave is also immediately indicted by the opposing party. Without complete immunity, a president of the United States would not be able to properly function. And I personally would disagree with that, but, ultimately, to some extent, it does seem like the other presidents are kind of immune from any crimes, like Bill Clinton going to Epstein Island, or George W. Bush for the Iraq War, or Barack Obama for drone striking a U.S. for bombing a U.S. citizen without due process. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Dynamiting the Temple of Ayn Rand from LouRockwell.com by BHKMB. And yeah, I definitely think but that people do kind of put people like Ayn Rand on a pedestal. And I do agree that objectivism is a good philosophy, but ultimately that doesn't mean she isn't immune from any criticism at all. Then we have Taylor is going full Musk. Instead of filing a cease and desist letter to a college student using data published by the government, she should be advocating for more privacy and from the government instead. And that's from Air Silver One. It's a cross from the Facepalm subreddit. It's a story. Taylor's just lawyers threaten private jet flight tracker over stalking and harassing behavior. And I would agree, ultimately, since it's publicly available information, I don't think you should be stalking people's private jets, but ultimately, if you have the resources to do so, then I think, that falls under freedom of speech. So that's my thought on that issue. Then we have American Professional Con Man sharing the truth from Russia, from Clorox, and that's a cross post from the Interesting as Fuck subreddit. Well, didn't have this one on my bingo card. Tucker Carlson is in Moscow right now interviewing Vladimir Putin. And I personally think that interview is probably going to be mostly propaganda, but pretty much everything today is propaganda, so it doesn't really matter too much, I would say. Then we have Republicans divided over illegal immigration surge. Trump argues for mass deportations, and that's from Aftermath 1716. He says, hi everyone, here's a brilliant article about the political deadlock over the U.S.-Mexico border, and that's from the socialtalks.com. Republicans divided over, and that's the socialtalks.com, Republicans divided over illegal immigration surge, Trump argues for mass deportations. And ultimately, I think, I personally am more on the free travel side, but, ultimately when you have this many people coming in and a lot of them might be criminals, I think, we might need some deportations here and there, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Hallie loses Republican Nevada primary to none of these candidates from Reuters, and I posted that, and I said, the Nevada GOP primary is non-binding this year. Delegates to the RNC are going to be selected by tomorrow's Nevada caucus, which Trump is sure to win unless Ryan Binkley pulls off the upset of the millennium. But this still isn't a good look for the Hallie campaign. Her only road to nomination is 100% lies through the Supreme Court ruling Trump ineligible. Also, none of these candidates was placed second for the concurrent Democratic primaries, all behind Biden. That primary was binding, unlike this one. That's my thoughts on that issue. And then finally, we have our Special Libertarian Center discusses and grades the U.S. Vice President's number 33, Henry A. Wallace, and I said FDR's second VP and Secretary of Agriculture, a position his father also served in for his first two terms. Wallace was a former member of the Republican and Progressive parties. Party leaders were not happy with Wallace's perceived unorthodox religious pro-Soviet sentiments and denunciation of racial segregation in the South, so they had him replace Missouri Senator Harry S. Truman for Roosevelt's fourth and final term. He then went on to serve as the Secretary of Congress for just over a year and was nominated to the Press Party for president in 1848 failing to get any electoral votes. I'll grade C-. And that's my thoughts on him. And I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys next episode. Bye.